regime and promoting the protection of our rights as data subjects. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Ms. Barkley to the podium as she brings us remarks.
Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Ambassador Dr. Rocky Mead, former Chairman of the Data Protection Oversight Committee, Mr. Christopher Record, Chief Executive Officer for Jamaicans for Justice, Ms. Michael Jackson, our keynote speaker, Ms. Stacey Knight, caretaker for Northeast St. Andrew, representing the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Mark Golding, distinguished guest, the Attorney General Derek McCoy, Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, represented by Nyla Bishop, our Chief Technical Director in the Office of the Prime Minister, Joaquin Murray, and representative of the Office of the Cabinet, Maurice Ann Hudson, together with our other specially invited guests, including our panelists, privacy consultants, various members of the private sector and public sector organization, ladies and gentlemen present and those watching online. Good morning and thank you for joining us. Let me take this opportunity to thank my little but tallow team of officers who worked and are still working tirelessly to plan and execute this conference. They demonstrated unwavering commitment in organizing this event with the main goal of bringing together our partners and other stakeholders in one location for a sharing of knowledge and insights on a critical aspect of data protection. We are excited to welcome you to our Data Privacy Conference under the theme, Data is Power, Defend Your Rights, Secure Your Future. This theme serves as a vital wake-up call for us living in a digital age where data is the new gold, to reclaim our ownership of our personal data. It aligns with the global emphasis on data empowerment. Take control of your data. By embracing this theme, we aim to ensure that persons from all sectors understand not only the importance of protecting the privacy of personal data, but also the importance of empowering and enabling data subjects in the exercise of their privacy rights. With our steadfast dedication to promoting a culture of data protection and privacy in Jamaica, we have planned this conference following on the observance of Data Privacy Day on January 28, to inspire individuals to increase their awareness of their privacy rights under the Data Protection Act and to empower them to exercise those rights. Through this timely conference, we hope to facilitate essential dialogue about data subjects' rights and how they can be exercised, as well as how organizations can overcome the challenges of facilitating the exercise of those rights. As technologist and former CEO of Mozilla Corporation, Gary Kovacs once said, privacy is not an option, nor should it be the price we accept for merely accessing the internet. This quote encapsulates a fundamental truth about data privacy in the digital age. It emphasizes that privacy is not a luxury or a privilege, but a basic right that must be protected. In today's interconnected world, where we leave digital footprints with every online interaction, this quote serves as a reminder that we should not have to compromise our privacy for the convenience of the internet. It highlights the importance of safeguarding our personal information and insisting that companies and organizations respect our privacy rights. We exist in a data-driven world in which the loss or misuse of data, especially personal data, creates significant risk for both companies and organizations, as well as individuals, the data subjects. These risks include reputational damage, monetary loss, and identity theft, among others. It is because of these risks that data controllers face that cybercrimes are always happening, but are not always reported, despite the fact that victims are losing between $25 and $43 billion in just 1 year, 2023, in countries like the US, UK, Russia, and China, as was reported by Comparitech, a leading website providing information and privacy and cybersecurity service. It is because cybercrime is such a profitable venture that they estimate 1% of the world's population, that's 88.5 million people, fall victim to cybercrime globally each year. Jamaica has a special vulnerability. We are part of the Latin American and Caribbean region, LAC, identified as the least protected region, in which there are gaps in cybersecurity capacity due to, among other things, a rapid post-pandemic digitalization. Researchers project that by 2025, victim loss due to cybercrime, which is dependent on data, personal data, will skyrocket to $10.5 trillion globally. Ladies and gentlemen, data is money. Money is power. Your data is power. It is because of these same risks these same risks to data subjects that it is imperative that individuals, irrespective of age or technical proficiency, acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to safeguard their personal data, to control their digital footprint, and to protect themselves against cyber threats. However, because of the high likelihood of an attack and the risk of substantial adverse impact, individuals must go further. They must not just seek to protect themselves. They must take proactive steps to ensure that the data controllers to whom they provide their personal data, whether directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, are also taking positive action to safeguard that data against loss, misuse, and other wrong processing. Data protection is not just a responsibility or obligation of data controllers under the DPA. You, me, we are entitled to it. It is a right of data subjects, a right broken down into several privacy and access rights that must be freely exercised and firmly defended. Defend your rights. For the past 3 years since the Act and the OIC came into operation, we have focused a lot on the compliance obligations of data controllers. Their duty to appoint a DPO if required, register with the OIC and submit an annual DPIA once that provision comes into effect, to adhere to the 8 data protection standards, and to notify us as well as data subjects in the event of breaches, as well as to respect, uphold, and facilitate the exercise of data subjects' privacy and access rights. We have encouraged data controllers to instill confidence and comfort in data subjects to ensure that they know that their information is being handled safely and securely. This year's conference theme seeks to strengthen the focus on that last duty in the interest of the persons that the DPA seeks to protect. You, me, all of we, us. We are focusing on empowering data subjects regarding their rights to confidentiality, integrity, availability, and transparency. We are focusing on how data subjects can hold data controllers accountable for their actions and inactions and demand that they prioritize not just the privacy and security of our personal data, but also our individual and personal privacy rights. Data controllers must be made to recognize and respect our rights as data subjects to be informed about our personal data, how it is being processed, and to gain access to it, to have that data updated, corrected, or deleted as necessary and appropriate. our right to limit or prohibit any further processing of that personal data in certain circumstances, to have our data transferred to another controller or in a format as requested or convenient, to have our data processed for the purposes that we want and not for things like direct marketing without our free and informed consent. Our rights include ensuring that we are not made the subject of automated decision-taking without the right to it being reviewed by an individual that can appreciate our interest. Also, our right to be informed of breaches that affect us and to compensation where there's damage or distress suffered from a breach. Now, there has been a lot of talk about data controllers needing to adhere to the 8 data protection standards. And we know that efforts are being made to develop and implement privacy programs that will ensure compliance with the Act, especially with the requirement for technical and organizational measures to protect personal data. This year, we add to, not switch, add to the narrative. This year, everyone's attention, especially data controllers' attention, must be drawn to this most important compliance requirement. Process personal data with due regard to the rights and interests of data subjects. A failure to have regard to the rights of data subjects can be as costly as any breach. However, it must be appreciated that failure, for example, to facilitate data subject access requests may be due to genuine challenges experienced by data controllers, such as the volume and complexity of requests, difficulty in identification and location of data, especially where it is unstructured data scattered across multiple systems or platforms, an inability to comply with prescribed timelines, especially where the process of generating a response is not automated, as well as the need to avoid over or under disclosure of relevant information and many other challenges. These notwithstanding, data controllers must make best efforts to uphold and facilitate data subjects in the exercise of rights under the Data Protection Act. While our enforcement provisions have for the most part not yet been given effect, the Act in no way limited or removed a data subject's recourse to civil proceedings for redress. Thus, a data controller who fails to uphold data subjects' rights under the Act could find themselves subject to suit. In this regard, our judiciary must stand ready to receive claims and applications by data subjects and to overcome their own challenges in adjudication of data protection matters. In other countries that have fully implemented data protection laws and regulations, courts have encountered their own challenges in deciding cases related to the exercise of data subject rights. Among these challenges are interpreting highly technical and ever-evolving data protection laws and regulations, assessing appropriate remedies and/or determining liability for material and non-material harm, and how same can be allocated or shared between multiple controllers. Balancing the rights of the data subject to privacy against the legitimate interest of data controllers, freedom of expression, public interest, or at times the rights of third parties, and determining the reasonability of the measures adopted by data controllers and whether the controller may have followed industry standards or regulatory guidelines for best practices. My fellow data subjects, each piece of data we access or share carries immense value. Our personal data in particular is used to provide statistical information which helps shape decisions, influence policies, and drive innovation. Our personal data, its use or misuse, is determining the future we have, the future of our families, of businesses, of this country, and of the world. There is tremendous power in its ownership and control. With this power comes the great responsibility to protect it and to defend the rights in relation to it. It is therefore imperative that we become and remain vigilant and proactive in protecting our personal data, in exercising our rights in relation to that data, and in ensuring that the persons and organizations to whom we entrust it are held accountable for managing our personal data. Secure our future. As the regulators of data protection in Jamaica, we are aware of the need to amplify our messaging in respect of the rights of data subjects, how they can be exercised, and the importance of data controllers in facilitating them. This conference is our start. Throughout 2025 and onward, we will be ramping up our public education campaign and incorporating more of this aspect of data protection and the DPA implementation in our publications, whether via radio, television, or print media, and at our other events and activities. We recognize that establishing a robust data protection framework is not simply about enacting legislation, but also about creating a privacy-conscious society in which individuals understand their rights and are empowered to exercise them. By keeping you informed about our data protection laws and regulations, emerging trends, and existing best practices, we empower you and strengthen your voice in demanding accountability, in setting a firm foundation for a fair and equitable data ecosystem and a more secure future for all Jamaicans. Together, we can make data protection a tangible reality for every Jamaican. Thank you all for coming, and do enjoy the rest of the conference.
July 10, 2020, when the Data Protection Act, DPA, was passed, setting the framework for the protection of personal data. Since then, we have made significant progress. On December 1, 2021, several sections of the DPA were brought into effect. These included provisions for the appointment of the Data Protection Oversight Committee, the appointment of the Information Commissioner, and the establishment of the OIC as the regulatory authority. December 1, as the first effective date of the Act, commenced a 2-year transitional period for data controllers to prepare for compliance. It facilitated the build-out and operationalization of the OIC through the commencement of public awareness activities about the DPA and its implications, the OIC's relocation to a dedicated office space, and the development of the office's ICT infrastructure. In July 2023, the OIC was transferred from the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport to the Office of the Prime Minister, reflecting the alignment of its mandate with the country's digital transformation agenda. The 2-year transitional period ended on December 1, 2023, with additional provisions of the DPA being brought into effect. With this came the requirement for data controllers to comply with prescribed data protection standards and to register with the Commissioner. However, registration was deferred for a further 6-month period. In the meantime, the OIC launched its website, oic.gov.gm, enhancing public access to the office and information about data protection. The year 2024 was a landmark year for data protection in Jamaica. It saw collaboration, growth, and the strengthening of our regulatory framework. The OIC's first annual Data Privacy Day Commemoration Conference, held on January 28, brought stakeholders together to discuss the status and future of data protection in Jamaica. This was the high point of a week of activities to boost public awareness. On March 4, The first set of regulations under the DPA, the Data Protection Regulations, were published, providing critical support for the Act's implementation. This was closely followed on April 1 by the publication of the Data Protection Data Controllers Registration Regulations, which further detailed the registration requirements outlined in the Act, ensuring clarity for all data controllers. Additionally, in April, the OIC joined the thousands of data protection stakeholders, including regulators, privacy practitioners, and academics, who shared in the IAPP's Global Privacy Summit with focus on data protection best practices, evolving technologies, and developing issues. This led to the OIC becoming a corporate member of the IAPP. When the 6-month extension of preparation time ended, registration commenced on June 1, marking yet another significant milestone in our journey. Our online registration platform was launched, and data controllers were able to submit their applications from anywhere at any time. On October 9, the OIC's Register of Data Controllers went live on its website, helping to promote transparency and accountability for persons processing personal data. A further thrust towards accountability came in November, when the Supreme Court delivered its first ruling under the DPA, setting a legal precedent and reinforcing the rights of data subjects and responsibilities of data controllers. Throughout 2024, in recognition of data protection as a shared responsibility, the OIC made key strides in formalizing its commitment to developing the data protection landscape through both local and international collaboration. Through its public awareness activities, the OIC helped numerous public and private sector entities better understand DPA compliance requirements. The OIC has also advocated for the development of training programs for DPOs. The OIC contributed to the implementation of several World Bank projects and initiatives linked to data protection, including a series of consultations promoting data protection across the Eastern Caribbean and highlighting Jamaica's progress in implementing the DPA. We also participated in the EU-LAC Digital Alliance Dialogue on Data Governance in Uruguay. As we look to the future, the OIC remains committed to promoting good practices by data controllers, empowering data subjects to exercise their rights, enhancing our regulatory capacity, and strengthening Jamaica's data protection regulation framework with the support of its partners and stakeholders. Data protection is everyone's business. The OIC, your data, your rights protected.
I think a recap like that deserves a round of applause. Because as we can see, this little but Talawa team is doing everything in their power to make sure that our data is protected. And there's something inspiring and invigorating about seeing the progress that is being made. I don't know if you see it too, but we're kind of bearing witness to something historic. Like, I was born into seeing things already established, but no, not only are we seeing the establishment of something new, something important, but you have your role to play in it as well. Because as Commissioner rightfully pointed out, this is something that requires teamwork. This is something that they cannot do by themselves. They need your support. And so, as a data subject, you're going to think to yourself, what can I do? How can I protect myself? And then when you become informed, there's something about knowing the truth that makes you want to share it with other people. And so you're finding out, hey, wait, no, if I find that there is this rift in how my data is being managed, what about my neighbor? What about my mother, my father, my sister? And you share it and you share it. And I hope that you take that responsibility seriously, because I do. So we're going to continue into our remarks. I just want to thank the Commissioner again for sharing with us and reminding us the importance of protecting our data and the important role that the OIC plays in that as well. We'll now hear from the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Ambassador Dr. Rocky Mead. Following Dr. Mead, remarks will be made by the Chairman of the Data Protection Oversight Committee for the period 2022 to 2024, Mr. Christopher Reckford. Please make him welcome.
Ms. Stacey Knight, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Christopher Reckford, Chairman, Data Protection Oversight Committee, Ms. Celia Barclay, Information Commissioner, Ms. Michael Jackson, Executive Director, Jamaicans for Justice, bilateral and multilateral partners and their representatives, heads and representatives of MDAs and private sector entities participating, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Office of the Prime Minister considers it non-negotiable that all efforts be made to protect the privacy and security of citizens' data. You can see this manifested in the fact that this particular effort of data protection has been pulled into the Office of the Prime Minister, where the Prime Minister takes responsibility for these things he considers very important. We also embrace our responsibility to ensure that there's legislation that will direct precisely how citizens' data are to be protected. And we also take seriously our responsibility to ensure that the mechanisms are in place to enable the legislation and the enforcement of it. That's how the Office of the Prime Minister sees its role. Data privacy is actually not just based on the fact that we are very much becoming a digitalized society, because I think there are many people who put the two together. So you're doing all these digital need data protection. Citizens are entitled to have their data protected, whatever form it happens to take. The reason for the increased interest and efforts at this time, as we seek to become a first world digitalized society, whether by 2030 or otherwise, is that the advancement in technology, and especially in cyberspace, allows for easier, unauthorized access to citizens' data. So that needs to be clear. It's not just digital data that needs to be protected, but digital data can be more easily abused. But there are those who may say that given this increased opportunity for abuse, that we ought not to explore new technologies and new ways that citizens can engage with the government, engage with the state, and do business generally. You will hear a lot of strong well-argued objections to various initiatives that are proposed that would seek to make the functioning of the state more efficient. And we need to listen to all the perspectives. But we need to consider whether we should not explore opportunities for citizens to engage more efficiently because of the fears, or should we make these opportunities available, but then do what we're doing right here, ensure that there are mechanisms in place to secure citizens. It is not just the cyberspace that scares people. For most of humanity's existence, whenever a significant technological leap is being taken, you always have persons who object, either on some principle or because of uncertainty. We tend to be comfortable with what we know, with what we have always done. And those of you who have heard me speak before, I'd have given examples that you probably didn't think of now. Something like writing was actually objected to at some point. You know that people were killed, people were executed for proposing that the world was not flat. Things you take for granted now, there were times when people lost their lives for advancing things you take for granted now. Uncertainty and fear is normal. That's the reason there's an entire industry of change management. But the way we are to treat with that is to ensure that we can address people's fears while still advancing. And most importantly, we need to have options available for those who object to technological advancement, whether on principle or out of uncertainty. In another forum, I gave the example of the fact that we are well advanced with mechanical ways of moving from point A to point B, but there are those who still hold to the fact that they want to use a horse and buggy, and they should have a right to do so. If you prefer to move by a donkey and take an entire day to get to Montego Bay, then that should be your right. But that doesn't mean the state should not make more efficient means of moving from A to B available for those who want to use it. Public education is therefore very important, and therefore I was very happy to hear the Information Commissioner emphasize that. And we want to make sure that as we seek to educate the public, we ensure that we respect the views of all. We give the information, but we respect the views of all. I want to take this opportunity to thank the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Mr. Record, for helping to guide the process. I want to thank the Information Commissioner for leading in the advancement of this effort. And you've seen a little show of the work that has been done, especially over the past few years, to give teeth to the legislation, because I pointed out the obligation of the Office of the Prime Minister. But of course, as you know, very often legislation is passed, but you don't see the effect of it because it's not implemented. So I want to thank the Information Commissioner and her team for advancing this process, and also for putting on the event like this. In closing, I want to just re-emphasize the obligation that the Office of the Prime Minister sees that it has to ensure the protection of citizens' privacy and security. And I'm making the distinction there because it's important that we know that we need to make sure citizens' data are secure so they are not abused, but otherwise it is also important to make sure people can have privacy. So even if no one is seeking to abuse the data, to use it for any nefarious purpose, people are entitled to just privacy if that's what they want. And the Office of the Prime Minister embraces its obligation in that regard. We will continue to play our part in advancing necessary legislation, in providing the mechanisms and resources to enable, to ensure those who are collecting and controlling people's data are aware of their obligations, to ensure that mechanisms are in place for enforcement, and therefore our citizens can take advantage of whatever technologies they would like to, knowing that their data will be reasonably secure. Thank you all for coming out and sharing in this effort, and I hope we can continue to work together to secure our citizens' data. Thank you so much.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for those kind words, PS, and all the protocols having been observed. Let me just get to it and get through my allotted few minutes. In today's digital world, folks, data is much more than information. It is currency, and most importantly, it is personal. Yet often, we trade it away. We trade away this power without realizing its true value and all the risks involved. The Data Protection Oversight Committee serves as an independent advisory board that supports the Office of Information Commissioner in ensuring the effective implementation of its duties and enforcement of the Jamaica Data Protection Act. Including some of the things that we're supposed to be doing as a committee is monitoring compliance, is advising on policy and best practices, is ensuring accountability, and is also supporting public awareness and education. And around this public awareness and education piece, this is where I have a problem. I have a little challenge, because I've sat in various audiences. I've sat with friends and colleagues in various industries who claim we didn't consult them. They didn't hear about this. They don't know nothing about this. This thing is foolishness. It's going to die off in another year or so. And I sit down and I cringe and I bite my teeth and I try to figure out, do I go ballistic or do I stay calm, right? So these organizations are not treating with data privacy properly and are handling it as an afterthought. They are organizations. I overheard a situation with a legal set of people, and I said, no, I told the person that told me the story, I said, you're incorrect. They could not have said that. They said that this is going to pass. This is just another one of Jamaica's laws that it don't have no teeth and not going to matter. I took a deep breath, and I said to the person, I said, do you understand the global history of data privacy? Do you understand what drove this? Do we understand the lives that were lost that got us to this place where this thing has become important? And in those discussions, I try my best to explain to people that we are but a babe in the global scheme. Europe has been doing this for 50 plus years. And in my recent discussion with 2 data privacy organizations in Europe, you know what's interesting? They're having some of the same challenges as us still. And we're only 2 years old. We're brand new, right? And so when I hear the noise out there in our own situation, in our own dispensation of how we're doing it and the timing and the complaints, I just say, we're just starting. There are different phases, and different information commissioners and authorities throughout the world take the way in which they get started differently. Some people come out swinging. Some people come out fines. Some people come out, you know what, we need to inform and educate the people, which I think is what our commission is doing, is making sure that we have to inform and educate, but more importantly, we have to also build the office. And building the office taking a little time. We hear the Prime Minister, I was at an event with him yesterday, explaining to us where we are with our unemployment. So to finding all the right people is taking a little time, which I may put on my AI task force hat and suggest that we may want to consider using some technologies to do some of the work that we're looking for the people to do. Anyway, that could be controversial, right? So folks, so where's my technology not working now? It wants my face ID. It can't see my face. Anyway, so at the end of it, folks, what I want for us to walk away here and understand that this data protection is massively, massively important. And with respect to folks who are not taking it seriously, I'm warning you. I'm warning you. But there's opportunities, tremendous opportunities. Beyond compliance, embracing data privacy can be a strategic advantage with many organizations, especially those that are critically assessing the way that they handle personal data often unlock hidden efficiencies in the organization. It also reduces risks and drive innovation because you're now going through the data protection analysis. You're going through to figure out, hold on there, why are we collecting all this information? Yesterday I was filling in a form at a hotel, and I paused and I said, why need all this information for? The lady stepped back. I said, no. Why do you need my date of birth? Why do you need my organization that I'm with? Why you need all that? You need my name. I gave him a name. Here's my ID. I don't know why you need my address, but okay, here's my address. I am checking in, I'm going to be checking out. And she couldn't answer me. And I smile and I pause and I say, I'm not blaming you, but this is just part of just understanding that this is my personal data that you're all collecting from me. So beyond us, beyond the compliance, organizations can seize tremendous opportunities if they review their systems and process to figure out how they're taking in this data, what they're using this data for, and how's the data leaving the organization. And in doing so, companies have started to earn more money and save costs, because sometimes they're finding out, I didn't need to be collecting this information. I didn't need to be storing it. I didn't need to be printing all of these forms, because they're digging deeper in the processes that they're using. So in closing, folks, my request is simply this. Data privacy is not just a legal obligation. It is a commitment to trust, to security, and the future of our digital society. The question is not whether you can afford to comply, but whether you can afford not to comply. Thank you very much.
Now, exercising his right to rectification, I am here to rectify an error I made earlier. That was Mr. Christopher Record, and not what I said earlier. And I'm not going to repeat it because You know, we're on a path of correcting our mistakes, right? So thank you so much, Ambassador Meade and Mr. Record, for your kind remarks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, gracing our stage is Jamaica's most sought-after cabaret performer, Bunny Rose. He has earned his reputation as a consummate professional, a premier performer performing to a diverse group of local and international audiences. What makes him extra special is that he sings in 9 different languages, which includes English, Spanish, Italian, Latin, Mandarin, German, Greek, and Hindi. All right, so we now have the pleasure of being favored with an item of entertainment by Mr. Bunny Rose.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Okay, good. So I'm here to just share some music to make this go along a little smoother. And the song that I'm about to do, it speaks for itself. It speaks about us rising above. This is a fairly new venture, but we will rise above the challenges. We'll rise above whatever hurdles come against us, because that is simply what we do. May I have some music, please? Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round. You can find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we're gonna walk it out. Move mountains, we're gonna walk it out. Move mountains, we'll rise up. Rise like the day, we'll rise up. We'll rise unafraid, we'll rise. And we'll do it 1,000 times again. We'll rise up, high like the waves, we'll rise up. In spite of the ache, we'll rise. And we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. When the silence isn't quiet and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe, and I know you feel like dying, but I promise you we'll take the world to its feet. Move mountains, we're gonna walk it out. Move mountains, we'll rise up. Rise like the waves, we'll rise up. We'll rise unafraid, we'll rise. And we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. And all we need is hope. And for that, we all have each other. We all have each other. And we'll rise. Yeah, we'll rise. Oh, we'll rise. We'll rise, we'll rise, we'll rise. We'll rise up. Rise like the waves, we'll rise up. In spite of the ache, we'll rise. And we'll do it 1,000 times again. We'll rise. Yeah, we'll rise. Oh, day will rise up. In spite of the ache, we'll rise, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. We'll rise, ooh, we'll rise, yeah, we'll rise, we'll rise up. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I think we can do a little bit longer on the applause. Thank you so much for that wonderful rendition. Now, I'm very excited. If you're following along in our programs, you can see that we are ready to hear from our keynote speaker, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, Ms. Michelle Jackson. Now, a little bit of history, because I'm very excited to introduce her. In a previous life, I was a journalist. And when I was covering any human rights story, I don't know if you remember, but I would call her for a bite, for feedback, I would call her. And now, in an almost full circle moment, I have the pleasure of introducing her here today. Michelle Jackson has over a decade of experience in philanthropy and development, showcasing leadership in organizational development, and NGO management. She has worked with both local and international development agencies, specializing in human rights, HIV/AIDS, youth, and education development. Academically, she holds a master's degree in public policy and management from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. She also serves as an adjunct lecturer at the University College of the Caribbean, teaching politics, business communication, sociology, and business ethics. And as the leader of JFJ, she has championed justice, transparency, and human rights in Jamaica. Her initiative includes the Know Your Rights campaign, justice tours, community outreach programs, and mobile legal clinics. She has been a vocal advocate for stronger accountability in security forces, legislative reforms, and the protection of human rights through educational and digital initiatives. Please make welcome our keynote speaker for the morning, Ms. Michelle Jackson.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are we all doing? I must say it is a pleasure to be here, and let me extend my thank you and congratulations to our Information Commissioner, Ms. Celia Barclay. Please go ahead and give her the welcome that she deserves, supported by her team, of course. And we acknowledge Ambassador Dr. Rocky Mead, the Permanent Secretary at the Office of the Prime Minister. We also acknowledge Mr. Christopher Reckford. Let me not say Reckford at all. You know, us Jamaicans, we tend to spoil everybody's name. I'm called Michaela from time to time, right? So that's how we do it here. But I will do the right thing and call the correct name. And we acknowledge our other guest speakers, those who brought remarks, and certainly those in the audience. And there are no young ones here. No? But again, it is a pleasure to be here to bringing remarks on this important journey. When we look at the theme that we're celebrating and recognizing, your data is power, defend your rights, secure your future, it brings into sharp focus how significant the Data Protection Act is. And when you look at a piece of legislation that is just 2 years old, because it came into effect following the transitional period in late 2023. But you hear the Data Protection Act being integrated in other pieces of legislation, in other policy development, and so on. So, for example, you hear us saying, where are the body-worn cameras? But when you read the protocol of that document that the Jamaica Constabulary Force has, it recognizes the importance of the Data Protection Act. When you look at the passage of the National Identification System, the NERA Act, it was delayed, and commendation to the government, because they are a listening government wherein they realize the importance of the Data Protection Act coming into effect before the NIDS would. So when we look at the Data Protection Act and how influential it is in data privacy, not only privacy, but security, we understand its importance. Now, knowing your rights in all of this is something I'm happy that the Information Commissioner and her team, they're focusing on. Because before, they had to ensure that data controllers understand their responsibility. But in this new wave, as I'm calling it, us as data subjects must understand our rights. And our privacy rights is not just in the Data Protection Act, but in the Constitution of Jamaica. And I have to mention that. Why am I also recognizing the Constitution here? Prior to 2011, we had our Bill of Rights in Chapter 3 of the Constitution. And then 2011, we saw a remarkable shift in Jamaica's constitutional framework when we had the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms so amended and passed. And for those who are listening, I want you to learn Chapter 3, specifically Section 13, subsection 3. You know, when you're watching cable TV and you hear people talking about First Amendment rights and so on, we have to get to that stage where we can say Section 13, subsection 3. I'm going to ask you to repeat it for me. Section 13, subsection 3. Please go ahead. Section 13, subsection 3. We have to get to that stage where we can say these things. Because at that particular provision, it highlights our right to privacy. And it says that we have the right to privacy, or protection rather, of our private and family life and privacy of our home. It also indicates that we have protection of privacy of other property and of communication. Again, why is it important for me to be mentioning Section 13, subsection 3? We have deliberated in our courts the issue of right to privacy and what that meant. Now, I think we all support the National Identification Registration Act that governs NIDS. We support it. But we can recall in the first iteration of that legislation that there were some concerns about our right to privacy. And the courts had a deliberation on what Section 13, subsection 3 really meant. Because some legal minds were of the view that that particular section didn't really encompass a broad-based right to privacy as other jurisdictions. But for those who like to read, and if you read that over 300-page judgment, for fun, interest, or otherwise, you saw where our courts had different tests in really trying to see whether or not the first iteration of NIDS respected our right to privacy. And they went all the way to India and several other jurisdictions to really think through, how do we understand right to privacy in Jamaica. I won't read aspects of that judgment, but again, over 300 words, but it makes for good reading. Yes? And with that judgment comes a full appreciation of what the right to privacy means. And it takes me back to the Data Protection Act and our right to privacy as data subjects. Because if we understand our right to privacy in a broad way, then we will be able to claim those rights as the Office of the Information Commissioner rolls out their public education. As we go online and sign up information and so on, we will understand how we use our data and how we protect our data. So in a digital era that we're living in, your data is indeed power. In a digital era, you realize that you put information in several spaces. If you're going online to buy music, your information is there. Again, if you're going to check in for an all-inclusive weekend to relax you and your family, you hear the amount of information you have to share. Your love lives are on the internet for those who use the Cupids and so on. So you realize that different aspects of our lives are online already. We have a digital footprint. Our children are also online. And when you look at the amount of data that we input on these different platforms, then we understand again that data is power. And because it is power, we can look at it in different ways. We can look at data as property. And because it is property, it is currency. And because it is currency, we also protect it. It's like your money in the bank. I wonder if you realize that. That every time we input information, and again, the previous speaker said it, it shapes public policy. It tells you how people are affected in different ways, in different locations. It helps the telecommunication companies know how to market to us. When you go on Instagram, for example, and you look at a Beyonce video, you see the Beehive information coming up. For those of us who follow the news a little bit more, you see all of the news information coming up. It's because your digital footprint is being tracked. And because it is being tracked and monitored in different ways, it means that we have to protect that data that we have. Now, there is the old saying that knowledge is power. And if we recognize that knowledge is power, then we recognize that we must understand the different elements of the Data Protection Act and how it is written to protect our rights. So even when you look at this banner here, the right to be informed, we must have a right to know what our personal data is being used for. The right to access. You must have an ability to request your information. The right to rectification. Your personal data must not be incomplete or inaccurate. And by the way, some of these protections, they were in place in other pieces of legislation before the Data Protection Act. So for example, if you look at a credit report that you're supposed to be getting, each year you must get a copy for free. If there is any wrong information, inaccurate information in it, they must correct it. So you see where there is a change in landscape on the responsibilities of data controllers in protecting our rights. The right to be forgotten. It may be a little bit more palatable when it is written and it's called the right to erasure. But that's what it is. The right to be forgotten. Again, if you look at different pieces of legislation, it has to indicate how long will your data be retained for, who will be using it. Those information, they're there. It's in the NIDS, and it's in other pieces of legislation that governs national security. Who will have access to my fingerprints? What will they be using this type of information to do? And once you understand some of these fundamental rights, you have the right to object. No, I don't want my information to be used in this particular way. I don't want you to be texting me all hours of the night, to be using my data for marketing purposes. So when you look at the different elements of our rights in the Data Protection Act and the principle of what you see coming out based on the privacy rights that we have in our Constitution, we understand the importance of what this office is doing, and we must support it. Now, when we look at this concept of invasion of privacy, we tend to look at it in a very conventional way. We tend to look at it where we're poking our nose in somebody's business. When a neighbor pushes away the curtain and peeps at you. But in a digital era, invasion of privacy takes a different shape. And I think sometimes when we look at things so conventionally, it may almost let us give up our rights. What do I mean by that? A lot of times we say, because you're on social media, it gives somebody else the right to invade your privacy. Because you're on social media, it gives somebody else the right to put your image on something else. Because you're on social media, it gives somebody else the right to make some AI video of you talking and saying something that you did not say. That is an invasion of your privacy. I am on social media to follow TVJ, CVM, my good colleagues here. That's what I like to do. And when I tweet, I like to tweet about current affairs. That's my property, my words. It authorizes no one to use it without my expressed consent. And that's what I want us to appreciate. Not because we are online, it gives others the authority to use our information in a way that we did not intend for it to be used. So with data protection and data privacy, I want us to rethink how we think about rights, data privacy rights in particular, and what expectations of privacy can we have in a digital era. One of the things I like about this piece of legislation, and I've read every single word in it long before today, actually. Yes, I did. I like reading these things. I'm one of those people. I remember when this act was a bill, I was working with an HIV agency, and initially, how this bill was being championed, due to no fault of our parliamentarians, some people saw it as just e-commerce purposes. Because, you know, we're a part of the CARI Forum, you have the Economic Partnership Agreement and so on. So some people thought it's just e-commerce. When you go on Facebook, you buy something on Apple and so on. And I remember saying to a colleague, listen, this bill is going to be so critical and transformational in how we protect our rights in different spaces. And here it is today, that when it comes to medical and health issues, the Data Protection Act. National security, the Data Protection Act. Social protection, the Data Protection Act. It is tremendous in protecting our rights. And when you read through the legislation and the responsibility that data controllers have, again, let us treat our data controllers and urge them to recognize that they are champions of human rights. So similarly to how we have a Sexual Harassment Act passed through Parliament, and you see private sector entities and law firms having webinars. I know some of them have started. I remember, I think Trevor Forrest, I've seen your name on some flyers on social media. You've been a part of JFJ's Let's Start Justice show as well. talking about data protection, protecting your rights online through use of technology and so on. Let's have our data controllers be champions of human rights for the cause, where they are the ones who are telling us as data subjects, these are your rights that you have. If any of my employees or our system breaches those rights, this is how you can have the right to appeal, the right to rectification. That's what we want to see coming from our data controllers. Again, the legislation is so well written, wherein there is even a notice period, 72 hours, I believe, if there has been any breach. And we've seen some things happening in the public space recently. One of the entities, they came forth very quickly and apologized based on information that was made public that ought not to have been. Another one took a little bit longer, beyond what is required in the law for our comfort. And I just want to remind data controllers, when there is a breach, you have a responsibility to notify the data subjects. That is a responsibility under the law. But I think when we're speaking, we have to get beyond the law and just a sense of ethics, integrity, and morality as we respect the rights of individuals. As I close out in a few minutes, because time is upon us, the legislation is not just one that encourages. It also has teeth. It can bite. Up to $10 million, I stand corrected. There's a fine there for that amount. I believe section 62 it is. They say we must know it, you know. There's a term of imprisonment as well if you breach some of these provisions in the Act. Again, section 62, you have section 18 that spells out the offenses. Know them. Because if there is a failure, you, the data subjects, must be able to quote the sections. Let me repeat it for you. There are many sections with different fines, but 62 is the nice one because it has the $10 million in it. If you breach it, you pay a fine. If you breach it, I think there's up to 4% of your income and so on that you have to pay. Listen, people, know these things, you know. Because to know our rights is also to understand that when somebody breaches them, we're taking you to court. I'm a firm believer in that. Because sometimes it's the court that must speak for people to listen. Know them. Exercise these rights. And at the risk of saying Mr. Cameron is here as an attorney, he's on your panel as well. You can get a card from him at some point if it's something that he's interested in doing. So compensation is one of those things that I do encourage people to know. Now, this legislation, as I said, is so important, but there is something, it would be remiss of me before I leave here not to indicate this. We have good legislation on our books, but I am concerned that with a piece of law like this, that is transformational, that we've had instances of the Data Protection Act being used to circumvent and undermine other pieces of legislation, namely the Access to Information Act, which is there. You have a right to know. Just as though you have a right to your privacy, you also have a right to know in our Constitution. So I'm very troubled when I see state agencies saying, I can't give you this information, notwithstanding your right to seek and receive information under the Constitution because there's a Data Protection Act. Stop it. This legislation ought not to be used to undermine any other rights that we have in our country. And I would urge state agencies to adhere to the law and ensure that we do not use it as a tool for secrecy. Now, my last comment. It is important to underscore that privacy is not lost or surrendered merely because the individual is in a public space. Your right to privacy is sacrosanct. It must be respected. And I will also say, your data is power. Use it wisely. Protect it fiercely. Section 13, subsection 3. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Wow. Right? Okay, I don't think I need to say anymore. That was a very profound presentation, something for us to think about as we continue on. We need to develop an appetite for knowledge, for the DPA, for being specific, because knowledge is power. Data is power. And your data is power. Thank you again so much for that presentation. Ms. Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director for Jamaicans for Justice. And we can't let her come here and not show her how much we appreciate her. And so I'm going to invite the OIC's Human Resource Manager, Mrs. Sophia Boyd, to present a token of gratitude to Ms. Jackson. Now, after such a powerful presentation, I think we need some time to digest it, feel it, absorb it. And so we're going to be breaking for just a short while to allow you here at AC Hotel to refresh yourselves before we go into the second half of our program, which is the panel discussions that we have lined up. You online, you take some time, you also get your break, and we're going to be right back. And so for those of you here, we have a special treat for you outside. We have our exhibitors, the Bank of Jamaica, University of Technology, Privacy and Legal Management Consultants Limited, and MOCA here to kind of answer your questions and anything you have any information you have concerning data protection and privacy. They're here to answer it. And following the break, we will come back here for the panel discussion and the Q&A segment. Our theme, your data is power. Defend your rights, secure your future. It promises to be riveting, ladies and gentlemen, so I will see you on the other side of this break. Good morning and welcome to the Data Privacy Conference being hosted by the Office of the Information Commissioner in collaboration with the UE Data Protection Office and Privacy and Legal Management Consultants Limited. With this week being observed as Data Privacy Week, today's conference is being hosted under the theme, Navigating Privacy Challenges in a Connected World. I want to welcome those of you especially who are joining us live on YouTube at Office of the Information Commissioner and Jamaica Information Service, JIS. And also we're being televised live on JNN, so Jamaica News Network. So we're gone abroad, yeah? We can say that, right? So I would like to say that this event is for everyone. Everyone. With technology being a part of our day-to-day and in the way that we do business, in the applications that we use on our phones, our information, like never before, is available for everyone to see, which makes it very important for us to protect our information. Our privacy is under increased threat and on a scale that we probably couldn't have imagined 20 years ago. So it is very important that this conference helps us to address the complexities of navigating privacy in this interconnected era, exploring the concerns and evolving dynamics that shape our interconnected society. Before we begin this journey, of course, let us invite the presence of God, which will be done by Public Education Officer here at the Office of the Information Commissioner, Khadijah Bryan.
Please stand for the prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for another opportunity to still be in the land of the living. We thank you for all the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us. And as we're about to begin this data privacy conference, Lord, let everything that is shared be of value so that everyone understands the importance of data privacy in this connected world. Be with our speakers, be with our host, be with those who are watching online, and we pray that your blessings will rain down today on us. Thank you for your love and your mercies. Forgive us of all our sins. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Here on the mic, I am Janelle Powell, your host, your moderator for this very exciting program. And we are ready to get into the rest of it, but we have a few remarks that we want to hear. Very important people are going to come and speak to us. Propelled by the aim to see a privacy-conscious and empowered society in a digital world, the Office of the Information Commissioner has put on this conference. And to bring us greetings, to bring us remarks, we will have the Jamaica's first Information Commissioner, Miss Celia Barkley, who will bring us greetings.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. Let me first of all thank you all for being here. And I would like to start, as much as I know we'll end, with a vote of thanks, with my own personal thanks to our stakeholders and partners for this event. In particular, and there's a reason I do it, I thank the University of the West Indies Data Protection Office for hosting us, as well as PLMC, who are patching in to this event to live stream it to increase our viewership. Now, I say that because we are here celebrating Data Privacy Day. The day will be on January 28th, on Sunday. And when we thought about what this office could do this year, firstly, we wanted to do something, and we wanted to do something impactful. But we wanted it to spotlight the topic. I'm not going to say the issue, but the topic of data privacy, because it's something that touches and concerns each and every single one of us. And so it has been in the news, in the media, everywhere, but certainly we wanted to ensure that at this critical time, all eyes and ears were here. And if ever there was a theme that would shine a light on exactly where we are and what our focus should be at this time, I think it's the one that was chosen. And I must thank and credit our Public Education Officer, Ms. Khadijah Bryan, when she approached me with her proposal and said, Commissioner, I have a theme, and I think this is it: navigating privacy challenges in an interconnected world. I didn't second guess it. I look at Jamaica and where we are a relatively young country by all accounts, but very ambitious and always trying to keep a pace with everything else that our first world neighbors do. And I look at the monumental task that we have taken on in trying to pass and implement a Data Protection Act with our limited resources, because that's what we have, that's what we're working with. And so when we talk about challenges, there is absolutely no doubt that we are challenged. We're challenged individually, We're challenged collectively in our groups and our sectors, and we are certainly in many ways challenged as a nation. But when has challenges ever stopped us from trying? It never has. And so it's just a matter of how do you navigate those challenges? But in doing so, and especially if you're doing it in the field of privacy, you have to think about that interconnected nature of people, of organizations, of countries, of the entire world. We don't stand separate and apart anymore. We are in a time that is moving fast. We're in a world where the gaps are closing rapidly. Everybody has or can find information about everybody else. And so the question is, who are you? And do you have full control of your very being, your identity, the personal information that makes you who you are, when it can be passed at the click of a button from one device to another? Not to the person next to you, but to the person hundreds of thousands of miles away across the globe. See, interconnectivity is also a tool, a strategy for mitigating those risks, because it is through our own connections, as is represented here by the stakeholders that we share this event with, that have partnered with us over the past 2 years and that continue to partner with us. It is from those bonds, those linkages, those sharing of resources that we were able to get here today. And so I say this to say, today we simply gather to recognize the importance of data privacy, to recognize the impact of data protection laws on each and every one of us and on our country, but also to recognize that as we face the challenges, whether as data subjects in exercising our rights or as data controllers in trying to comply with this law that requires so much of us, or even as the service providers, the training providers who are helping to prepare persons to assist others with their compliance journey, that it is only through building and leaning on those connections, the public-private partnerships, other collaborations, that we will all be able to benefit from this regime as is intended. So I close by saying we have put together a program that I hope will allow persons to just open their minds to what is possible, what is intended with this legislation, but at the same time to allow persons to recognize that it can be done, it will be done, and we will do it together. And we hope as we go through that we will lighten the mood somewhat with a bit of entertainment for all of you. Because at the end of the day, we have our burdens, but we bear them with a smile, and we move on to accomplish big things if we simply persevere. I thank you all for coming and hope that you enjoy the presentations of our speakers. Thank you.
Ms. Joaquin Murray, to bring us greetings on behalf of Senator the Honorable Dr. Dana Morris Dixon.
But to set the context, we are in a connected world, and the theme speaks to navigating the challenges of this connected world in which we find ourselves. Now, the world that we find ourselves engenders quite a bit of cross-border commerce. We need to conduct business across borders. In fact, according to the World Economic Forum, in last year's meeting, not the one which just took place, it is estimated that over the last 10 years, up to last year, the trade which took place via electronic commerce was estimated at $2.7 trillion US. That's quite a bit of money. And today, nearly 2/3 of commerce is related to digital technology. Now, that is nothing to scoff at. We are recognizing that technology is not only a facilitator, but it's also a driver. But I want us to pay attention because data protection is not only relegated to digital technologies, it also encompasses the normal things that we do. When we entered this room, we would have given our names to the registrar outside who was registering individuals who were coming in. That is personal data that we just passed. Now, that is something that has to be protected outside of the digital space. And it's something that we have to start thinking about. In addition, though, McKinsey Global, and that's a large consulting firm, they have said that in addition to commerce, we're talking about flows which represent knowledge, know-how, intellectual property, and yes, data, personal data. These grew by more than 40% per year over the last 10 years up to last year. So there is exponential growth in the flow of information and how this information is going to be used or is being used across the world. So that is some context for you. Further, going back to the World Economic Forum, there is a basic dilemma here. What is that dilemma? The dilemma is not only about you placing your personal data in the various applications that you interact with in cyberspace, not only about you doing trade online, but it's also about governments. It's also about governments protecting their citizens. And this protection involves regulation. But you see, regulating how data is used within the local jurisdiction is really challenging enough. Governments now have to regulate cross-border transfers, which is a part of...
So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Patrick Anglin as he presents on the topic, Overcoming Challenges for Data Protection Compliance within related organizations and across jurisdictions.
Privacy champions. Try not to quote, at least at the outset, the penalties section of the legislation. We like to quote that, the 5 years in the parish court, you can be imprisoned and $5 million, and the lawyers like to quote that. Who everybody can point to and say, that's the czar, that's the privacy man around the place. That person is the driver. To do that, you have to appoint a leader for the entire process. We haven't started with the law part yet, We're just looking at the organization. And perhaps my colleague presenters will deal with the law better than I. It means if there is no lawful basis, then processing cannot take place. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Consent is one exception. And we're not going to go into the rest of the exceptions. Compliance. For fair processing, very, very simple. Do we have privacy statements around our notices to our data subjects? What are these? So, for example, let me give you an example. At the university, we have 4 of these statements. We have a general statement to tell the general public how we process their information. We also have one for our current students, one for staff, and the one for staff is very dynamic. It's ever-changing. And then we have another one for alumni. This is how we embed this particular compliance mechanism. But in addition, records retention. We have a set of records retention policies. In fact, before this, we have an archives and records management program which deals with how it is we manage records from entry or from creation to disposition. It's important. I'm going to finish. Lawful processing. Again, this speaks to the consent forms necessary. We have to look at existing contracts between us and other entities. And if none exist, we have to put them in place. We have to also look at our own legal obligations. So I'm going to stop now, because I think my time is up, and summarize. The first thing that we have to start thinking about and understand, we have to recognize this is not the GOJ making your life more difficult. You saw the map that I showed. This is what is happening across the world. In fact, the UN system has 193 member states. Of that, 158 of them have legislation in place. 193 countries. Of that, 158 have legislation. So it's not about us making things difficult for the Jamaican businessman or for the Jamaican school or for the Jamaican company. We have to look at our organizations in terms of operations, in terms of its culture, and embed privacy in the culture. The principles come first.
Crucial aspect of the program with our second presenter, Justine Collins. She is an attorney at law and privacy specialist at Hart Muirhead Fatta.
Managing the risks of interconnectivity and future technological developments. And when I got this topic, I don't know about you, but I had to Google it. Interconnectivity is really lots of people collaborating with one another over a thoroughly meshed network, right? So when we talk about connectivity, and we've heard a lot about it today, the click of a button nowadays with the World Wide Web and with the internet, we are increasingly interconnected. What are some of the implications? Because I know we had this wonderful musical selection about the unreachable star, and you know, that was my graduation song for prep school, The Impossible Dream. But I don't think data privacy is an impossible dream, right? Right, Ms. Barkley? It certainly is reachable, but we will all get there together. And so when we're talking about interconnectivity, there are benefits, there are implications. So improved efficiencies, we heard about how data privacy and interconnection can be a strategy. So we're able to, instead of having all of these charges taking up the rotary telephone and calling, we can send a little email, click of a button, or we can send a WhatsApp. So as we navigate this interconnected world where at the click of a button, information can be shared and, you know, everything can be uploaded, how are we dealing with it from a data privacy perspective? What are the risks? I don't like to talk about risks to start off. I like to start off with the benefits. But yes, there are some risks that we have to think about. So data breaches, your vendors, your third parties. So very, very important. As we're able to connect with a large amount of third-party providers, we're able to get this really inexpensive provider out of India, or, you know, compared to some of the providers we're seeing in the States, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is great. But then you start seeing, okay, we're going to be sharing, we're giving access to providers across the world, our personal data in our systems, our customers' data, and our employees' data. So we have to be mindful about possible data breaches. You don't want to be in a situation where you have a software provider or you have a third party and there's a breach and you hear about it 6 months later. And it's something that's very, very real, because you as a controller company, you have certain obligations, 72 hours, right, to report any kind of data breach. So you want to be in a position where you are. So as we heard before, when you're processing data, you need to ensure that you have one or more lawful bases for processing. And when you think about using AI and automation, it might be a little challenging to fit it into one of these categories. So let's just revise, let's just refresh our minds as to what these bases are. So you can get consent. So that's where, somebody says, I, Justine Collins, consent to you processing my data in this purpose. It can be necessary for the performance of the contract. It can be compliant with a legal obligation. It could be something that is in the vital interest of the person. When we're looking at some of these AI developments and technological developments, it can pose a challenge for some of our fair processing obligations. Dr. Anglin spoke about the importance of your data protection statement or your privacy statement. So it's important that you're letting people know, is this going to be is it going to be automated decision making? Are we using AI in our practices? It's very important because I know it sounds like, boy, this is happening overseas and we don't need for business about that. But right here in Jamaica, there are places that use automation every day. HR departments that are using application tracking software, and they're using automation so the recommendation is, if you have your resumes and you don't have the keywords in the job, the vacancy notice is not going to pull it up. So the recommendation is, if you know you're applying as a data protection officer, make sure you put in this word and that word and that word and that word so that the system can pull it up. And that is an example of how even here in Jamaica, we are using it. It is real. It is every day. And so informed consent is important. Do your data subjects know, do your applicants know for a job that they will be subject to automated decision making? What's the level of human intervention? And explicit consent, I would recommend that you are saying, well, specifically when you're applying for this job, you need to know that, hey, there is an automated component in it. So I think that those are some of the things from the lawful basis point of view that you need to think about. Fair processing requires that transparency. So we definitely need to be thinking about that as technology develops. And so I refer to automated decision making. That is a specific right under Section 12. I know that words might be a little small on the screen. I hope you can see it. But there is a right under Section 12 which allows a controller or a company to ensure that no decision is made based solely on that automation, on that automated processing for the purpose of evaluating certain matters. So matters such as creditworthiness. There are also attendant rights involved, which involve the right to be informed of the logic behind that decision making. And so, oh, thank you. They're giving me I need to wrap it up, but that's fine. No, not wrap it up. 10 minutes. Okay, great. Yeah, man, I can't finish. All right, great. So guys, let's walk together. So it requires the controller to provide meaningful information. That is what we're getting from Article 29 Working Party, also known as the European Data Protection Board now. Meaningful information about the logic involved, and it should be sufficiently comprehensive. So if you give it to me and you say, it looks like the code behind it, I'm going to be like, huh? I don't know what you're talking about, right? I need to understand what it involves. How do you go from X to Y in terms of making that decision meaningful to the layman, right? It must be able to. I know that Dr. Anglin can probably read it, but I know that I wouldn't be able to read it. So every man should be able to understand what the system is doing, right? And not only that, there should be some sort of human oversight of that decision-making process. And it's not just, you just put in, okay, yeah, we're going to put in one little, component of human intervention at the end. It needs to be meaningful, not a token gesture. That's the guidance that we're getting. And so when you are using AI and automation, in your HR processes or whatever it is. You decide that, hey, this is really, really cool. Let's test out this. And everybody's using ChatGPT now. Everybody. I was doing it at training at a school, and they were saying, yeah, man, we put everything in ChatGPT. All the teaching notes and this is that, we create it with ChatGPT. And I was like, well, make sure you're not putting students' information in there, So very, very important. There's a recent case as well coming from the Court of Justice of the European Union, which clarifies really what this automated decision-making right involves. This was a case which involved a credit rating agency that had produced a sort of score similar to how our credit bureau works. And on the basis of that score, a borrower was refused financing. Now, the thing with that is that while that decision really looked at the fact that the credit rating agency's evaluation was something that was really heavily relied on by the lender in their ultimate decision, they wanted to say, no, you guys need to actually provide the logic, provide the decision-making process, the explanation to the borrower. She had objected. She said, look, can I understand why you made this decision? And they said, no, this is our IP. This is our trade secrets. We're not going to let you know. So certainly you're seeing at the international level heightened scrutiny where automation is being used, even if it's not the sole basis. And so we do need to be very, very careful as we pull for all of these new trendy things. And yeah, man, we're going to vet applicants in this way because we get hundreds of applications. We need to be mindful of how we're doing this and the data protection ramifications of it. About your processors, your third parties. Not only, consent is really important, but a lot of times you have a whole lot of processes that you're not thinking about, and you're not thinking about Section 30, which requires you to have sufficient contractual guarantees in place. Who are you interfacing with? You're sharing information. Just sending an email with personal data has an implication. So I know that there's some work in this space in terms of possibly getting certifications, data protection certifications for companies. So that could be something that is a good tool for assessing whether or not a vendor is compliant.
CEO and founder of Design Privacy, Chukwuemeka Cameron, is here to welcome us to a roadmap where innovation meets implementation.
Nature.
And
as a business, we collect as much information as possible. Why? Because we may need it. Why? Because we have AI, because we have machine learning. Those needs large data sets to be able to analyze and derive actionable information. So it's an imperative to collect these large data sets. And even if it's not for that reason, why? Because we always did. And that's my natural disposition. We want more. What processes these large data sets? Servers that consume energy that can take down our grid. If it is, we were to implement, not because it's a nice principle, that doesn't work. There is no incentive for us to adopt that principle of data minimization. You have to have a law to tell people, no, you cannot collect it unless justified. And this is not legal. It's a fact. There's an imperative to collect it without any justification. So to minimize that, you have to say, no, you have to justify why you're collecting it. Let me bring that home with the final piece now. If it's the servers that are processing these large data sets, and you minimize the amount of data that you're collecting, you're actually reducing the cost of energy. A very direct relationship with maintaining our national grid and implementing data protection principles. So that one may have maybe a new concept, but when I'm put in an unfair position, I usually like to rise to the challenge. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to what I had in mind. And this is me hedging against the book, the person who wrote the book on digital transformation, because I can't appear to speak to with any authority on the issue in front of him. So I'm going to take it from a different angle, because I never read his book, because he has not provided me with a copy of the book as yet. So what do we think of when we speak about digital transformation? Digital transformation is not AI. That's not digital transformation. If we were to go back, and I'm inspired by this book written by Professor Harari, Sapiens and Philosophy. If we go back into a room like this, well, not a room like this, but with numbers of persons, the same amount of people like this, living in a cave because we're afraid to go outside, because we cannot protect ourselves. We can't keep ourselves warm. We can't protect ourselves against all the threats that are outside in terms of animals that want to eat us. That is what society is. The technologies available back then were stones. That was technology that enhanced our ability to protect ourselves. So I'm not going to go through the transition from then to now. What I want us to appreciate is the whole concept of what technology, what transformation is, and where we're coming from. Thank you very much. And so I'm going back way back into history, so she frightened, so she quickly gave me the time limit. But I'm fast forwarding to the future. If we jump to today, from where we were then to where we are now, how do we fast track digital transformation? Because when you look, the speed, the amount of time, the centuries that we moved from the Ice Age, Stone Age, and all the different ages to where we are today, where we cannot keep pace with all the disruptions. We keep on hearing about disruptions, and we don't know what's happening. How, as a company that has to make money today, that is compelled to be competitive, to stay alive, how do we do so? How can we use the Data Protection Act as a tool to remain and become competitive? Let's start at the national level. Unfortunately for the government, it wasn't a how do we employ data protection to help our digital transformation. Our Chief Justice Brian Sykes said, if you wanted to have any digital transformation, you have to have a robust data protection framework. Full stop. It was very easy. It was very easy for them. And what I don't know if I've said that too fast. So the government of Jamaica, for various reasons, wanted to transform our society digitally. However, you and I all said, we're not upon that with you. The tool that they were using was one of the primary tools was the implementation of needs. But we said, no, not on your Aunt Nelly. I'm not giving you my information. The government, and as such, the opposition of the day took the government to court and said, you're breaching the people and privacy. And our Chief Justice went further than what the opposition wanted. He struck down the entire bill, and he said, no.
Welcome again, everyone, to the annual Data Privacy Conference hosted by the OIC, the Office of the Information Commissioner. Now, if you're just joining us, I'm Janelle Powell, and you would have missed a riveting first session where we were given a charge to remind ourselves that our data is power and we should defend our rights and secure our future, which is also serving as our theme today. Now we're at the point of the program where we can get a little bit more up close and personal with information concerning our data privacy. So I'm going to invite our online audience to pay keen attention because there will be an opportunity for your questions to be asked to our panelists. And so I would like to take a minute to just introduce who we have with us here today. We have Mr. David Gray, he's right here to my left, Deputy Information Commissioner at the Office of the Information Commissioner. He is a seasoned public sector worker who has been serving in several of its agencies. He is a justice of the peace as well as an attorney at law who holds a graduate degree in business from Manchester University and an undergraduate and undergraduate degrees in law and finance, respectively. Mr. Gray has also been professionally designated as a certified fraud examiner. We also have Ms. Chavanice Arnold. She is an attorney at law and a governance, risk, and compliance specialist. She has led the establishment of numerous data protection implementation programs, as well as conducted over 150 data protection training sessions for institutions in both the public and private sector. She also leads a course on data protection compliance at the UWI Mona School of Business and has also delivered compliance training across the Caribbean region and North America. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. David McBean, the Executive Director of the Mona School of Business and Management. He has over 30 years experience as a senior executive serving across the airline, telecommunications, IT, and media industries in the Caribbean. His past senior appointments include Managing Director for the Spectrum Management Authority of Jamaica, Managing Director of Products and Services for Lime Caribbean, CEO of the CVM Media Group in Jamaica, as well as VP of IT for the former Air Jamaica. And he, as you heard earlier, currently serves as the Executive Director of the Mona School of Business and Management. So what we're going to delve into today is the role of the Data Protection Act in ensuring the protection of personal data. And earlier, it would have been established what the rights of data subjects are. And data subjects is a jargony way of saying me and you as people. And so I want to go into the questions, starting with Mr. Gray. And earlier, it was mentioned by our keynote speaker, the importance of ethics and integrity. And I want to ask you what ethical considerations should be taken into account when handling personal data.
First and foremost, the major ethical consideration is the most important ethical consideration, of course, is that the rights and standards of data subjects are adhered to. We're talking about ensuring that the information that is being collected is accurate. We want to ensure that it's being collected for the purpose for which it was asked for. We want to also ensure that the agency organization has in place the technical and organizational means to protect this data. Of course, we also want to ensure that the rights are covered. We want to ensure that accurate data is dealt with. We want to ensure also that our data subjects, the standards, as I mentioned before, would have been upheld, the rights are also upheld, and the information which is being collected fairly and lawfully. Because if it's not being collected fairly and lawfully, that principle is the most unethical part of the practice of collecting the data.
And remind us briefly what the rights of the data subjects are under the DPA.
Well, first and foremost, you have the right to rectification, which is to correct any errors or inaccuracies in the data. You also have the right to access your data. Now, of course, accessing the data, there are limitations in terms of exemptions in the Act to deal with the accessing of the data. You also have the right, as was previously mentioned, the right to be forgotten, right? Of course, the fourth and last right, of course, would also be to ensure that in addition to the processing of the data and its accuracy, you also want to ensure that the relevant permission is granted and that the processing is being done in keeping with the permissions that have been granted.
All right, so now that the foundation has been set, I want to move over to Ms. Arnold, because even though we, as data subjects now, are informed on a basic level what our rights are, I want to know, as a data protection officer yourself and a data subject, what are some concerns that you know that data subjects have?
First and foremost, data subjects have a big issue with not being told what their information is going to be used for. And I don't remember who it was earlier who spoke about somebody requesting a copy of an ID. And he's asking, yes, Mr. Record, and he's asking, okay, why do you need my ID? And nobody furnished him with an answer. But I think, too, it's because data controllers do not understand their duty to inform data subjects about the processing of their personal data. And you spoke about ethical considerations earlier, and a big ethical consideration is transparency and building trust. You want to let people feel as though you respect that this data belongs to them, but you are only processing it for their purposes in a respectful way. That's one of the biggest issues data subjects have.
Point of trust, Mr. McBean. How do organizations establish that kind of trust going into customer relations and things of that matter?
So, thank you very much. Trust is something which is so fragile, yet so strong, right? So, trust is something you build up. People sometimes talk about brands. So you'll trust some people to take your data because you believe they'll take good care of it. Others, you'll go. And at the heart of the trust is what are the systems there. So, we're talking about respect for the data users and the rights of a data controller. And I just briefly say, I think we need to step back a little and look at our peculiar situation. So, for example, churches have a lot of data on you. Apartment complexes, somebody has a nice book, journal type book, with lots of information, people's license number, their names, who they're going to. And I think as we go further about data, that's somewhere I think it's a gap that we have to look at in terms of the trust, because we have to have a balance between reasonable fair use without it being overly bureaucratic, but at the same time protecting people's data. So the trust may be for large organizations, and we've even seen that being breached recently with some of the things that have gone on with hacking for the banks and people's financial information. And so that is at the core of what we do, and setting the stage for that.
And so then, as a follow-up, I want to know if there is a difficulty for organizations to balance the need for data processing with respecting the privacy rights of individuals.
There are tensions. I'll give you an example. So I'm now in the education sector. So a 19-year-old whose fees are being paid for by their parents is having difficulty with their exams and the parent requests information. Sounds reasonable, but I can't give the student's data to the parent because they're an adult. But there is the man on the bus would say, but that's unreasonable. You're living in a parent's house, they're funding your education, and they can't ask about your performance or see what you're doing in use of their money. So there become some even tensions like that. Now, we come down on the side of the law, which is we're dealing with adults, and your parents, you have no local standard, but you do it, you have to do it respectfully, and because everybody now has a lawyer.
And I think our audience would agree. And so I want to go back to the role of the DPO, because I see that many companies, many organizations are making the thrust and to hire data protection officers so that they can ensure that there is compliance. And so I want you, Ms. Arnold, to tell us briefly what the role of a data protection is under the DPA.
All right, just a quick one. Last evening, I asked some students, okay, you've indicated that your company has appointed you as DPO. Tell me who you are and what you are required to do. And I found that so many of them spoke about implementing policies. And that was the common theme throughout the responses. But then I always say to them, your source, as it relates to data protection, is the law. And I want to ask you, what does law say that duty of a data protection officer is? And it simply says that a data protection officer is required to monitor the compliance of the data controller with the Act in an independent manner. It goes on to outline that, of course, the DPO should assist data subjects with the exercise of their rights, should, of course, liaise with the office of the commissioner whenever there are any doubts in terms of interpretation of different sections under the law. And I do believe that a DPO must also report contraventions of the law, but that is when you have already reported or notified the data controller of that contravention and it goes unrectified. So I know that a lot of DPOs, they get excited. Oh, you know, I can report you to the Information Commissioner, but we need to appreciate that you are also there to ensure that the data controller complies with the law. So take all reasonable steps that you can. And I always say to people, sometimes you need to look at the environment that you are in. It is unreasonable to work in an organization where, you know, approvals take, let's say, a month. And you write a note now to the data controller saying, okay, you need to fix this issue within 2 days, within a week. That is unreasonable. So we have to also, as data protection officers, appreciate our circumstances, appreciate the environment that we are in. How long will approvals take? How long will it take for them to implement this, for them to change this? And I think we need to be more collaborative about what we are doing and how we do it, but still in an independent manner, as the law says.
All right, thank you so much for that insight. So I'm going to go back to Mr. Gray, to go back to the individual and what proactive steps they can take to protect their personal data online.
First and foremost, remember, data is gold. So the first thing you have to do is to ensure that you have adequate and robust password protection. And what we're talking about, you have two-factor, you have passwords now that are up to 10 digits long. But one of the most important things, it can't be your license plate number. It can't be 1, 2, 3, 4. Your birthday is almost out. Now, in the age of social media, of course, you have to be very careful what you're answering on social media. Social media asks, or is asking, a series of random questions, which the hackster, of course, is looking at the answers that you have provided, and invariably, 90% of the time, if you really look at it, it is some combination of what your ultimate password works out to be. So the hackster, of course, is looking at all your answers, having gotten into your personal space, randomly inserting almost all the information that you have entered, and voila, they're in. You also have to remember this is an open data space where, of course, you have public internet. Be very, very mindful of the transactions that you are going to do on public internet bands. I certainly, unless you are forced, would not recommend banking transactions. Try to find a private internet or have a VPN on your machine so as to ensure that you have in place adequate security protections. We're also in an age where people bootleg programs, and bootlegging programs is another thing where sometimes embedded codes are in there that move data from one point to the next. And you're entering all of your personal information. It's being diverted to someone else who utilizes it for a nefarious purpose. So, of course, you also have to ensure that even though you have a password and it's robust, you, of course, keep it private. You can't write it down on a piece of paper and have it stuck on your desk, or put in a drawer, or, as some people tend to do, constantly repeat it when they go to a machine and say, "You can't help me? Here's the password," because I'm not seemingly getting through. So those are the steps that we need to do. We need to take amongst all the other things that we can do to ensure that we have in place robust password protection and that it is maintained. Before I forget the last one, of course, routinely change your passwords. Some of us have the same password from the day we opened or got an ATM card until the day we are through. We need to ensure that at routine times we change the password and change it to a level that is not easily recognizable, and preferably, well, most banks now put in place a system that you can't repeat the same password ever. They invariably reject that password and say you have to use another one. So you also have to ensure that you do that.
That's a very important point, because I know that I know the Jamaican people, and there's something called the spirit of Kiambada that comes over us when we have to think about changing passwords for the million subscriptions that we have and the million places that we have passwords and logins to. And I will be the first to admit that I was one of those persons. And what I noticed is that on some platforms is that they're able to pick up on the basic passwords, and so they're prompting you to be more complicated, to try put a little bit more effort into your password creation. So I see on like an international level where we are making those adjustments. And I'm appreciative of the insights that we have gotten so far. And so I want to invite anyone here who has any questions for our panelists to take the mic that is in the center of the room. And if you're online and you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please do not hesitate to type away. I have one more question before we turn over into the feedback Q&A segment. So we just spoke about how individuals can take a proactive step towards protecting their personal data online. And there is a component of public awareness and education that takes the form of sensitization sessions and training sessions that I see many organizations, public sector and private sector, incorporating into their mode of operation. And so I wanted to know from Dr. McBean what the essential features of a data protection training program are, and how these programs ensure that data subjects' rights will be respected and facilitated.
So I'll take a stab at that, but the expert is beside me. She lectures in data protection at Mona School of Business Management. The core of the training is the law and what it means, and that's one layer. So that's what I call the technical layer. I think it was alluded to earlier, where you now have the operational layer, which is where I think we run the risk, right? Because even when we talk about data controllers and data protection officers, it presumes that an organization has enough resources to engage a data protection officer, then also to carry out the training in the organization. Because remember, all it takes is one careless person in an organization to have a breach. And this is where I think the role of all of the actors has to be harmonized for our environment. What I'm saying might be slightly controversial, but I think we have taken the GPDR from Europe, but we have not Jamaicanized it enough. And I think that has to be the next evolutionary stage that we go to. I mean, I alluded to the churches and the apartments earlier to make a point. But if most of our economic activity is around small to medium enterprises, that's 10 to 50 employees, and they have difficulty doing basic things like putting together good financial statements, you can see a lot of gaps in customers' data opening up. And so in terms of the sensitization, I think while the larger companies will be able to put on training and HR puts on things, and they can liaise with the Office of the Information Commissioner because they have both the knowledge and the attitude and the aptitude to do it, I think it's at another level where we really have to have, a simple cheat sheet so that a small business could go and say, okay, what should you do reasonably to protect your data? How do you go about it? What should you tell your employees? And I think as we go into implementation, that's really where now that sensitivity, and I think we may need to relook at the exemptions or how we treat. Right now it's just a blanket thing. Every breach, it's what, millions of dollars or time in prison or a combination of both. And it actually needs to be there, right? But would I treat NCB the same way I treat Miss Matthews' cook shop? And so I'll leave you with that as some of the considerations.
Thank you. If I may, there's a very important consideration whenever you are building a training program or you consider doing training as a data controller. It has to be fit for purpose, fit for your audience. So if you are in charge of, as a DPO, you're conducting training for a medical facility, it's not just about going in and saying, okay, who is a data subject? Who is a data controller? These are the rights of the data subject. These are the standards under the law. Fine. That is good and fine, But how does that apply to what I do every day? How does that apply to me? Having a patient come in, I'm asking for all of this information, I'm collecting your height, all of these diagnoses, put in a filing cabinet that may not be locked. We just have, and you know, doctors tend to have lots and lots and lots of old files, but we have to, people, ensure that it's fit for purpose. At the JCAA, whenever we are considering training, I seek to find specialists who can tell us what is going on in the aviation space. Where is data protection going in the aviation space? Lawyers, you have to look. Where is data protection going for law firms? And not just for law firms, but as sole practitioner folks. It has to be fit for purpose, or your people they'll not want to come to the training sessions because they'll think, oh, we're going to hear the same thing over and over. What does the DPA say? What are the rights? What are the principles? So please remember these 3 words: fit for purpose. Thank you.
And thank you. I'm getting the wrap-up signal from Madam Producer. So I want to ask anybody, do you have any questions for real? Oh, I saw 2 quick hands. All right, I can take one of those hands, and I saw the lady's hand first. So you can approach the mic and direct your question to one of our panelists.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. No. All right. My question goes to Ms. Arnold. I am in HR. We, an educational institution, the organization has decentralized location that does employment at their location, but in order to employ, you must have final approval from HR. So your official personal file is kept in HR. However, in these locations, they are collecting personal information along with sensitive personal data. I want to know, is it against the law, the act, for them to keep certain information? Because, again, we have accreditation. So an auditor may want to look at the person's qualification. But generally, we do ask that you do not keep any personal sensitive information for employees or prospective employees. Everything must come to HR. I want to know if that's a breach, because I hear whisperings now, you know, that persons are saying their information, particularly things that your marriage certificate, your birth certificate, TRN, your NIS, that sort of thing is kept in the location. They don't need that. They need information possibly on the qualification if the auditors come in. Is there a problem, a breach, and is there any suggestion as to solution?
That's a lot. I mean, any of my fellow panelists can assist me. But I think I like to say to people, when I listen to you, you know that something is off. And you mentioned your policy. You have a policy that requires them to not store the data that is being sent over to you. So you first have now a breach of your policy, which you will need to address. That's one. 2, you use the word need, and that takes us back to the principle of data minimization. You ought to be only processing what is adequate, relevant, and necessary for this very important word I'm going to use, purpose. So we have to look at the purpose for which we're processing the personal data in the first place. If they don't need to have it, then they ought not to have it. And I do believe that that was already recognized by your institution, which is why you had a policy that said they ought not to keep the data after it has been sent over to you. So now, as a controller, you now need to ensure that you have relevant clauses in the contracts with those different people to ensure that they have adequate appropriate technical and organizational measures in place. And for this specific issue too, don't just put a blanket clause, address this specific matter. You ought to destroy the personal data within this time period and provide certification of disposal as well. You can address it in that way. If any of my fellow panelists want to chime in, you can.
You have to remember that the data that you have collected, now you have a decentralized collection system on the face of it. You have to ensure that all the data that has been collected at least is funneled to your head office, and that your policy, as Ms. Arnold has indicated, deals with who keeps what, when, where, how, and why. Now, you have to remember that loosely kept data is the very, very first wrong that will create the breach. Now, in your discussion, you mentioned the matter of the breach. Now, remember, at this stage, the information that you have is kept within your entity, with different actors in the entity having the information. The policy, as we would say, would speak to where the information is to be stored and who will have access to it. Now, two things are important. You have the manual, and of course, you have the automated. You have to ensure that you have the organizational means in place to protect it, both in its manual state and in its automated or digitized state. Now, when it comes to you, because you're dealing with an employment function, the question is, what does your policy say about your data retention policy? How long? So you also have to ensure that if it is the process of employment has concluded, how much longer after the conclusion of that process do you maintain those records or seek to have them destroyed? And if it is that those employees become permanent employees, to ensure that the data that you have collected is securely stored, whether it be automated, whether it be manual.
I just briefly say, it sounds like you may also have, trying to say this delicately, you might have a management problem. Because in decentralized operations, there's always a tension between head office functions and field operations. And usually that's a question, especially if you have satellite HR officers in the field. So you may want to look at how that's arranged in a company as well.
All right, thank you so much. And it is on that note that we will transition to our second segment of our panel discussion. So I'm going to invite a switchover right now. Dr. McBean, thank you so much for your time, and we will now make way for Mr. Chukwemeka Cameron to take the stage. Now, I think we need to adequately introduce him. He is the founder of Design Privacy, which is a consultancy firm that helps companies comply with local and international privacy laws. He believes that by protecting informational rights and complying with privacy laws, allow for the free flow of information and ultimately the generation of wealth. He is a certified lead implementer for, these are numbers and letters, so take time with me, ISO 27701, which is an extension to ISO 27001 for privacy information management that aligns with the Data Protection Act. It's a new standard designed for use by anyone responsible for personal data in any sort of organization. Please make him welcome. All right, so what we're going to be doing in this segment is exploring data breaches and their impact on data subjects and approaches to mitigation. So the first question I will direct to Mr. Gray to establish what a data breach is and which breaches are the Data Protection Act concerned with.
The Data Protection Act covers two types of breaches. One is a contravention of the standards, and two, when you have data that has been processed being placed in unauthorized hands. Now, in the case of the Data Protection Act, both categories of breaches we are very, very much interested in. So the whole matter of there being a contravention of the rights, we are very much and actively involved or willing to pursue matters such as that. Where there's a breach, meaning in both cases, once the data controller is aware that a breach has occurred, of course, they have a 72-hour window within which to report that breach. Now, in reporting that breach, of course, there is Form 7 in the regulations, which speaks to the reporting of the breach, which will outline all the pertinent facts surrounding the breach. And, of course, our data subject will have to be made aware that a breach has occurred so that they can take the relevant steps to protect themselves.
So in an effort to drive home or create a scenario or image in our mind of what that would look like, are you able to pinpoint an example that the everyday person could relate to of a data breach?
Well, a data breach can simply occur when we send emails to the wrong persons. And it depends on the type of emails that we're sending. If we're sending an email detailing financial information and it is sent to the wrong person, that information is a breach. That information in the wrong hands is a breach.
All right, so say I am at work and I go for a break, I go for lunch, and somebody goes into my computer. Is that also considered a data breach?
Well, let's go back to our fundamental steps, technical and organizational measures which must be in place. We have a closed desk or empty desk policy, wherein which when you are through or getting up from your desk, you either shut down your computer or you remove all accessible tools from your computer to minimize and, of course, ensure that there's no unauthorized access. Now, if you have, by virtue of being a clearless player, left your terminal up, someone goes on your terminal, accesses that information, and sends it to all and sundry who is not authorized to have it, you have, by virtue of what you have done, created a scenario in which there can be a data breach.
Okay. Thank you for that response. And thank you for simplifying it, because earlier today when I was having a conversation with one of our OIC employees, it was enlightening to hear that there are other simpler ways to identify data breaches, because when I think of the Data Protection Act, I think of something big and something grand, but there are a lot of simple, relatable experiences that we can pinpoint that can help to drive the point home. And so in an effort to further establish the foundation of our discussion here today, I want to ask Ms. Arnold what the most common causes of data breaches are, whether they are internal or external.
It's unfortunate, and whenever, let's say I'm training staff, I feel bad to say employees can be your weakest link. I feel very bad when I say it, but it's the truth. And we have to consider that human error can cost us a lot of money. It can cost us consumer trust, financial damage, everything you can think of. But at the end of the day, it takes us back to how do we address that human factor. And you have to do your best, and you have to train people. Because the truth is, there are those who will get up from their desk. Yes, you have a clean desk policy in the organization. Somebody will come, hey, do you have a clean desk policy? Oh, yes, we do. Here's a copy. But then you have to ask yourself, do the employees know about this clean desk policy? Do they know what is entailed in this clean desk policy? And the issue here is paper compliance that many people push. You draft policies on top of policies on top of policies. But what about the implementation of the actual policy? What about having simulations, for example, to get people to understand what is required? So you have to get the people on board, because the humans will take you down, unfortunately.
And so, Mr. Cameron, if you're able to give us an answer for this, what do you find is typically targeted? What kind of information is typically targeted in a data breach?
So, one, information that can be leveraged. So, dependent on the type of organization you operate, any information that you hold valuable, that is what we want. So that's one approach. How do we exercise leverage over the organization? So if we were to take it, put it on the black web, are you likely to respond to my demand for money, or can you just ignore it? But there's a converse approach. Give me any information, because the other approach is just profiling, and I just need a piece of any information to build a picture of you. So it can be very targeted in terms of your most valuable information, and then any piece of information you throw away in the garbage, I want, because I can now build a profile around an individual and possibly steal their identity and represent myself as them.
And how do you see these breaches impacting people? What are some of the risks that affected persons face?
Thank you, because that's the part that I want us to start appreciating, and that's the part I emphasize. And I start at the worst case scenario. And when we say worst case, the impact of a breach on a data subject could lead to, if we were to look over to the north in the United States, we see where there has been a change in administration, and now that the leadership of the administration is now demanding names of persons that participated in certain prosecutions. And the result of accessing that data is that persons lose their livelihood. That's on the lower level. In real terms, people can lose their lives. If we were to go back to Green Bay, what was Green Bay? We had Colonel Rocky Mead here, so he may have been able to speak to it with much more authority. But this is where the government surveilled individuals, used their personal data, and rounded them up, took them to Green Bay, and killed them. So when we say what is the impact or harm that data subjects are exposed to, it's real. On the lower level, and what we are faced with every day are those persons who are sitting down in here today who may have used biomedical lab services, possibly to do a paternity test for a child that they had not necessarily with a partner, and they now fear that their wife may be tech savvy. And if the wife have any sense, she knows she can find out if I did a paternity test. And that would cause me not to be able to sleep, because I am now concerned that people may find out my business and my life can mash up. That's real. That's real. If it is, I had AIDS and I didn't want anybody to know, and now I know my information is available for all, I worry that my employers may find out and I may lose my job. That is real. So when we speak about personal data and protecting data subjects and reputational harm, and that is what the Data Protection Act is all about, is protecting data subjects from real physical and emotional harm.
Mental distress.
And we have him saying that we can protect them from mental distress as well. All right, so I'm going to turn over to Ms. Arnold, and I'm asking you to tell us about any non-technical or organizational measures that entities, especially in the public sector, can adopt to ensure and enhance data privacy and prevent breaches.
everyone will be annoyed with me today. Because at the top of my list, at every single moment, is training. That is at the top of my list at all times. You have to get people involved in what you are pushing for data protection compliance. It's beautiful to have a nice team. Oh, we have an IT security specialist. We have a data protection officer. We have an external consultant. We have a legal expert. We have a forensic expert as well. But what about the people in the organization? And I'm sorry if you're annoyed with it, but at the end of the day, you have to think about it this way. If the email is sent to the wrong person, who has sent that email? An employee, a human. Now, here's the thing. Many people are not alive to the very simple examples that have been brought up today. And that is why it is important for the 3 words I mentioned before. Ensure training sessions are fit for purpose. And you want to bring it to the forefront of the minds of the people in the organizations because you have to develop a culture of privacy. You want people to get to the point where they always pause. Should I do this? Oh, let me check the recipients of this email again. Can I click send now? Am I allowed to access this folder? Is it okay for me to share my password with Jean over in marketing because she said the director said that I should give her my password? Do you and Jean have the same access? So we have to ensure that we teach people about the little things that can lead to the great harm that Chuck just mentioned. And I'm sorry, it's training for me. It's at the top of my list.
So, this is the situation that we're in now. We are anticipating the needs for data protection. We know what we have. We know what we need to protect. We get the training. Everyone knows procedurally what to do, and it's fit for purpose. But there's a data breach. Mr. Cameron, what does it look like? What are the steps that an organization or a data controller is taking to make sure that, or in response to a data breach then?
So let us assume that it was a information security data breach, some in relation to access to some software and not in the physical world or the manual world. So what it looks like today, the first thing that would happen is that IT would cover it up. That's the first thing that would happen. If there's any interruption in service that they can't hide, they would escalate it to the CEO. And then the CEO would say...
Wait, hold on, let me stop you right there, because you had me at cover-up. What do you mean by cover-up?
Mr. Fu is here. Mr. Fu can explain. So what it means is that they may just press reboot and hope that everything is fixed and disappears. The problem disappears.
All the breaches disappear.
That's what it generally looks like.
Why? Why is...
Because it is a reflection on them doing their job or not doing their job. They have an interest to serve.
Okay.
They can't tell the boss that your systems that I set up are not working properly. They're putting their self-interest first. Mm-hmm. And so when the law says there shall be no conflict of interest, that is what it means between a data protection officer and an information security IT. They're putting their self-interest first. When it is escalated to the CEO is going to be putting the business's interest first. So how bad is it? We don't know. Okay, we need to fix this. Don't tell anybody. This is just between you and us. You will report to me directly, and I need a report by tomorrow. Okay? And that is if there is no impact on external. Then a week, a day after that, you may get a public thing. Or our emails may be down, so please contact us via this. This is what they say, acting as if nothing is happening. Then if you are a DPR in the privacy world, you may, if you're in a WhatsApp group, you may get a WhatsApp from an expert that would say, you know, that there's a breach going on at somewhere. And then the DPO would have to ask the CEO, excuse me. And you have the DPO for the organization. The DPO would then say, I have a copy of some of your data. Is this your data? Yes. Okay, so when was a DPO going to find out about it? Well, we were trying to figure it out before we made an issue of it. So that's how it's generally treated today. And we saw the biomedical case. That is real. The report came out that, well, when the report came out, it said it happened back in December. It is only when it came to the public's attention that they sought to advise, and this is over 700,000 records. There's no email that can be sent to everyone. There must be some sort of public notice, because that is a significant issue of public trust, and you have a duty to notify your data subjects. So if you think you have 700,000 updated emails, that is not true. That is false. So the only way to effectively communicate is through some public notice. So what it looks like today and across the world is hiding it until you have to treat with it.
So that to me sounds like worst case scenario, but
no, that's not worst case. That's standard operation procedures, standard, not worst case.
Okay. Let me just take a minute to digest this.
But that's not what our law requires, though.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Our law requires that within 72 hours of you becoming aware of it, you inform the Office of the Information Commissioner about it. Now, of course, Chuck's point is going to be, when did we become aware of it? But the fact of the matter is, once you have become aware of it, you have to inform us about it. 2, you also have a duty to inform those data subjects whose information may also have been placed in the wrong domain. Now, I'm not going to comment on the case that would have been brought up by him, but what I would say is, whether the notification is done by the press to a large group of persons, or if it is a small group of persons by which email addresses are, that they are also informed so that they can take the necessary steps to protect themselves. Now, the information may be particularly sensitive, and in particularly sensitive information, we have to be careful of discrimination. So it behoves the organization not to take the approach of pushing it under the carpet in the hope that somebody will take the carpet with all of these problems with it, and we'll wake up tomorrow morning in a beautiful new world where all our problems have been wished away. It doesn't work like that. And because data is gold, as we all know, no matter where you hide it, somebody's going to find it. And for me, that's going to be what the IT providers and the WhatsApp messages and the posting on social media is going to be. It will be found out, it will be brought in the public domain, and it will be addressed. What the organization has to do is build in policies to ensure that when a breach does occur, and we all know that it will occur, that they have and know the exact steps that they are going to put in place to ensure that whatever damage has been done can quickly be brought under control. All the players and actors are aware of it so that the data can be protected in keeping with the legislation.
And if I may, Ms. Powell, so basically what the Deputy Commissioner was just alluding to is probably one of the most important steps in incident or breach management, which is preparation. And we all know that phrase that annoys us, you know, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It applies here, because at the end of the day, you must have a plan that will guide you in the event that something goes wrong. Your teammates need to know themselves. So it's not okay for you to say, okay, on our incident response team, we'll have a legal expert, we'll have a forensic expert, we'll have somebody from IT. But who are those people? You have to personalize your plan. I watch a lot of TV. I love TV. And I don't know if you see in the American dramas when something has gone wrong in the world, in the United States, and everybody who should be in the situation room is there. They know they ought to be there. I mean, we don't really see it. We don't see anybody calling, hey, get to the situation room. People know where they need to be because something has gone wrong. And people need to know their roles and responsibilities. But yes, you'll have a team. But where does the staff come in? Where do your employees come in? They need to also know how to operate in the event of a breach. And of course, you're going to beg them, hey, do not speak to the press. If somebody from TVJ calls or if somebody from CVM calls, direct them to this particular point of contact. These are things that you have to drill because people get excited, you know, in the heat of controversy. Oh, you know, says this man in Jamaica, we talk a lot. And we want to be the one to share information. So you have to drill in the people that, listen, this is what the plan is. This is how we go about addressing whatever crisis we are facing. That's my contribution.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open the floor for Q&As. So if you have a question, you can take the microphone, you can line up when you are ready. Because I think it's important for us to hear from the people who are here. I don't like to talk at people. I like the idea of talking with. And a lot of us are here who I know have questions, and I don't see you approaching the mic. So this is your call to approach the mic. So we have one question coming up that we're going to hear. So it sounds that like to me outside of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that outside of the training, knowing the DPA, knowing, hiring the right people, it's also about instilling key characteristics within your employees so that that embarrassment that happens or that you feel when there is a breach, does not prevent you from being completely transparent about the next steps to take so that it doesn't snowball out of control.
Good afternoon. Nicholas Foster, Managing Director of Avla Business Services, United Kingdom and Jamaica. Following from the advice given this morning from Ms. Jackson, I'm going to ask a question from Section 3, Subsection 1, Paragraph B of the Data Protection Act.
Sounds like the function.
And this speaks to the issue of extraterritoriality of the legislation. So from the OIC roadmap video this morning, where there was a point there on enhancing regulatory capacity in terms of the compliance of the legislation. What is the Commissioner doing in terms of international big tech companies who may inappropriately exploit the data of residents in Jamaica and also seek to trample over their data protection rights? I would say that's to the Deputy Commissioner.
Well, there is the
If I may jump in on that, I think this focus of the Information Commissioner for this year in terms of empowering data subjects and putting them in a position to exercise their rights is the first place to start, because the Commissioner or the Commission has no independent power. Well, yes, she can initiate investigations, but in a world where we have data subjects, we have to focus on persons who are first negatively impacted. So the first practical step is empowering data subjects. And in the roadmap that I saw presented, we have seen where she is now starting to make those international relationships, because Jamaica does have a robust extra-jurisdictional reach. We have our mutual legal assistance treaty, and it is contemplated that data protection breaches by big tech, those matters will be treated in the same way. But the complaint must start with the individual that would go to the Information Commissioner. Then the Information Commissioner would liaise with the Information Commissioner in the relevant country. So in terms of one, empowering data subjects and then building relationships with other information commissioners is what I have observed just from today. So I just wanted to put that, jump in with that.
Also have to remember that the commissioner will have to liaise with the appropriate minister who happens to, in relation to that extraterritorial reach, the ministry in charge of foreign affairs, to put in place the appropriate legal means for this sharing of information and or association with entities and agencies outside. Just like you have the narcotics treaties, we will at some stage have to go to, in conjunction with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, having such treaties in place.
Thank you so much.
If I may follow on that question, I have a question for the Information Commissioner.
Oh, okay.
But it's more segue, because Jamaica has an opportunity, not necessarily from an enforcing data subject rights perspective, but in terms of leveraging all the work that has been done so far. Because the work that has been done so far and our legislative framework is a powerful framework. To what extent are we working? Well, and Ms. Joaquim is here as well. So it's really to all the right stakeholders are here. No. So Jamaica has an opportunity to benefit from an adequacy decision. What that means is that we have all of our foreign exchange come from all of our GDP come from foreign, or tourism industry or BPO sector. To what extent are steps being taken, or have we started to consider helping the government to apply for adequacy decision that would allow Jamaica to be the place of choice as a matter of law to do business with? Is that on the table? And that is a significant. Jamaica has been looking for a golden bullet to drive growth, to drive our economy. To obtain an adequacy decision means that Europe, you can't do business with any other country, and you have to look at Jamaica first, because they respect our citizens' rights. So you have to look at them first. To what extent are we leveraging all the work that has been done? Because we have done a lot of work. Are we taking steps to make our economy benefit from all of this work?
I think I want to give who he's asking the question, this very big question, some time to think about their response to him.
No, we're looking off the panel, but we have a rep here, so I'm not sure.
No, all of them. Okay. I want to give him some time. But in relation to the question that was asked about big tech, in Jamaica we have a thing that we say, you have to, and I'm young, so I may get it very wrong. You have to dance a yard before you can dance abroad. Right. Now, how are we going to go outside and be finding big tech? Because I know you're thinking about the news and you're seeing, UK ICO finds Meta how much millions of dollars and all. We're not there yet. And we have to accept that reality. Because if we haven't even started finding our very own people, the sanctions regime is not yet in effect. We have to be realistic about it. We don't even have the resources. People cannot find DPOs. people are giving DPOs monitoring and implementation jobs at the same time. We have to be realistic about where we are. It doesn't mean, though, that we should take it for granted that we're a small nation and not take chances and make big steps. But we have to be real about it, all right? Awesome.
So those are two big questions for consideration for the OIC. So I will allow for some time and deliberation where that is concerned, whether it be on camera or off camera. But we also have a question on our YouTube page from a very concerned citizen. Andrea Edwards Brown asks, can a breach occur when, for example, an invite is sent to an invite to a meeting is sent and all email addresses are available to all invitees?
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes. Because the email address for a particular individual is private. So the suggested norm as of now, of course, if we aren't aware of it, is you blind copy all the participants or you create a group with undisclosed recipients so that the email will go to the respective parties, but their email details are kept confidentially.
All right, thank you so much. And I don't see any more questions on our YouTube, and I don't think we have any more questions inside. And so I want to invite final remarks from our panelists, things that we should consider, any last words that you'd want to leave us with before we conclude this segment.
Create a culture of privacy. We're in a new era. The Act, of course, is new. It is wide-reaching. It covers multi-sectoral approach to data protection and privacy. It's not one shoe fits all. So persons will have to work with the Office of the Information Commissioner to get their information needs up to speed so that we can parlay this piece of legislation to the resounding benefit of both our data controllers and our data subjects.
Thank you.
For me, it's about asking you to consider at all times, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the price of compliance or the price of non-compliance? I want to implore everyone to operate as though we are in a space of trust and excellence. Do not slapdash the thing. Take the relevant steps that are necessary. And I need you all to appreciate that there are people out there who will help you. Find the people who will help you, get the approvals in your budget, and we have to get to a space where data protection is a line item in the budget. It's gonna take time, a lot of time probably, but we have to get there in order to operate as though we are people of trust and excellence who respect the rights of data subjects. That's it from me.
So we'd want us to start thinking about what data protection means and the real harm that data subjects are exposed to and that we expose data subjects to every day by processing their personal data. And it has very little to do with IT and data, but it's really protecting the citizen from harm and demanding the same sort of protection you want for yourself, because you are also equally exposed to those real-life harms. So you need to put yourself in a position to equally safeguard your clients and data subjects from harm.
Your data is power. Defend your rights, secure your future. Thank you to my panelists for their time and expertise. And thank you to you all for being a captive audience, participating both in person and online. And we are going to show our appreciation for you. So I'm going to invite our panelists to stand, take the stage as we invite Mr. Cecil Toms to do a presentation to them.
Good afternoon, all protocols observed. Dr. McBean is on the stage. Thank you so much for being here. On behalf of the Office of the Information Commissioner, I'd just like to thank all of you, our panelists, for your engaging and incisive presentation on the Data Protection Act and how it is that we can ensure the protection of personal information. I trust we all would have also learned that being a data protection officer is not just about implementing policies, but a lot more. And that it is vitally important for training to take place in your respective organizations. So as a mark of appreciation from the Office of the Information Commissioner, we'd like to say thank you with these tokens.
Thank you all so much for your participation. And we are just about ready to close the program, and so I am going to have the vote of thanks moved at this moment by Mr. Troy Ashley, who is the Information Center Manager of the OIC.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's with great honor that I stand here before you today to deliver this vote of thanks as we conclude what has been an insightful and impactful data privacy conference. On behalf of the Office of the Information Commissioner, I extend my deepest appreciation for everyone who has played a role in making today a success. First and foremost, we express our profound gratitude to all the individuals who shaped today's program with their vast knowledge and invaluable insight. A round of applause to Ms. Janelle Powell, our exceptional host, for guiding today's proceedings with professionalism and poise. A special thanks to today's program participants, Ambassador Dr. Rocky Mead, Permanent Secretary, representing the Office of the Prime Minister, for your invaluable remarks and continued support of Jamaica's data protection journey. Mr. Christopher Record, Chairman of the Data Protection Oversight Committee for the period 2022 to 2024. And of course, Ms. Celia Barkley, our Information Commissioner, for her tireless efforts in ensuring that data protection remains a national priority, and for her unwavering commitment to empowering both data controllers and data subjects. Special commendations to our keynote speaker, Ms. Michael Jackson, Executive Director at Jamaicans for Justice. Your powerful address reinforced the critical role that data protection plays in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of individuals. Your message challenged us to think deeply about how we defend our rights and secure our future in an increasingly connected world, and for that we are truly grateful. A heartfelt thank you to our panelists who engaged us in a thought-provoking discussion and provided practical insights on the evolving landscape of data privacy. Mr. David Gray, the Deputy Information Commissioner of the Office of the Information Commissioner, Ms. Chavanese Arnold, Data Protection Officer of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority, Dr. David McBean, Executive Director of Mona School of Business and Management, and Mr. Chukwema Cameron, founder of Design Privacy. Your expertise and perspectives have helped us here today to better understand the ethical considerations, risks, and solutions surrounding data protection. We would like to highlight our exhibitors who have played a crucial role in making this conference more interactive and engaging. Special thanks to the University of Technology, Bank of Jamaica, the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency, MOCA, and Privacy and Legal Management Consultants, PLMC. Your participation has enriched our conference by providing tangible examples of how different sectors are implementing data protection measures. Your work continues to bridge the gap between policy and practice, and we are truly appreciative of the role you play in fostering a culture of data privacy in Jamaica. A very special thank you to Mr. Bunny Rose for gracing us with your musical talent here today. Your performance added a wonderful touch to today's proceedings, allowing us to reflect and appreciate the significance of the conversations that we've had today. Allow me to mention the dedicated team that has worked assiduously behind the scenes to ensure the successful execution of this event. Their hard work, precision, and dedication to excellence have made today's as successful as possible. We extend our sincere thanks to the Jamaica Information Service for their media and streaming support, Ms. Janelle Thompson, Social Media Manager, Mr. Wallace from Pro Audio Systems for delivering high-quality audio services, AC Hotel for hosting us in this outstanding venue, and for the provision of catering and technical support services. And Ms. Amoy Gaynor-Brown of Birth JA for her professional decor that has set the perfect tone for today's discussions. And to our media partners for amplifying this crucial conversation and ensuring that the public remains informed about the importance of data protection. A special and heartfelt thank you to the Planning Committee and the Communications Committee at the OIC. Your vision, strategic execution, and meticulous attention to detail ensured that today's conference was not just an event, but a meaningful and engaging experience. You remain focused to the bigger picture while navigating countless moving parts behind the scenes. Your dedication for months of planning and coordination of logistics, speakers, and participants has truly made the difference. This event is a testament to your hard work, passion, and commitment to excellence, and we deeply appreciate all that you've done. Finally, to each and every one of our attendees, our esteemed guests from the public and private sectors, and for those joining virtually on YouTube via the Information Commissioner's YouTube, Information Commissioner Jamaica, and the Jamaica Information Service, thank you for your time, engagement, and commitment to strengthening data privacy in Jamaica. Your presence and active participation reflect the collective responsibility we all share in safeguarding personal data and upholding privacy rights. As we leave here today, let us remember our data is power. Let us continue to defend our rights, secure our future by making data protection a core priority in our organization and in our lives. Thank you once again for being a part of this important discussion. Safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you again next year.
And we'll end in a similar way we started, with an item of entertainment by Mr. Bunny Shaw. And as he comes, I hope you leave here with a renewed sense. Did I say the wrong thing again? I did, didn't I? Bunny Rose. Man. We hope you leave here today with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment to safeguarding your personal data. And the conversation does not end here. Let us continue to advocate for our rights and secure our future together. Until next year, I'm Janelle Powell. Take care.
Thank you, thank you. And just for the record, Bunny Rose is actually my real name. Yes, it's on my birth certificate. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, it's important to do songs that speak for themselves. And this song that I'm about to do, it's called A Million Dreams. And I want you to remember this. What we're doing here are little bits and parts of the million dreams for the world that we want to make. And I can see a world that's waiting up for me, that I call my own. Through the dark, through the door, through where no one's been before, but it feels like home. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say I've lost my mind. See, I don't care if they call me crazy. We can live in a world that we desire. 'Cause every night lying in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. No, a million dreams for the world we're gonna make. A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there to make you smile on a rainy day. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say we've lost our mind. See, I don't care if they call me crazy. Run away to a world that we desire. 'Cause every night lying in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. No, a million dreams for the world we're gonna make. However big, however small, let me be part of it all. Why don't you share your dreams with me? We may be right, we may be wrong, but I want to bring you all along to the world that